Kaylee's is very strange. First wound is going to be a incise wound on the top of her head, on the frontal scalp, extending posteriorly and medially across the midline. So it's going this way. It's 2.5 inches by 3/4 of an inch. So it's what they would consider a gaping wound. The end is branched and shows irregular red abrasions at the margin, as well as parallel linear red abrasions extending inferiorly from this wound. So it's got two red abrasions coming off of the end of it, which are basically scrapes. It is hemorrhagic, so it happened during the attack. There's a triangle defect at the end of the wound, which is interesting, but the depth of the wound is 1 inch. So that's one. On the right superior parietal scalp is another 1/2 inch by 1/16 inch linear incise wound with discontinuous 1/16 inch red marginal abrasion. This is how the pathologist is describing a knife, undoubtedly with a partially serrated blade. And 1/16 is consistent with the size of the serrades on the K-bar. I've double checked. They're 1/16 and they're separated in a spaced out separation at 1/4 inch, but the actual serrate itself is 1/16. So a serrated, partially serrated K-bar is consistent with a lot of these wounds. And it's 3/8 inch deep. And this is how it would be oriented on top of the head. It's only a 1/2 inch, so I made it look a little bigger than it is. On the left frontal parietal scalp, 1 3/4 to 1/16 inch J-shaped incise wound. And it's again got 1/16 to 1/4 inch red marginal abrasions, indicating the serrade consistent with the K-bar. And the J, that's just a terminology that the pathologists use. I checked other cases and they use descriptions like J the same as they use descriptions like linear, curvilinear, serpentine, which is snake-like, J-shaped, or hooked, L-shaped, Y-shaped. Those are all just general terminology of the pathologist. Nobody carved a J into her head. It's just a J-shaped wound. And there is a moderate associated subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage. Now, I had to go back because I'm going to have to correct what I told you yesterday in the video about subscapular. I had it typed subscapular, which is the shoulder blade. Subscapular is actually just bruising in between or bleeding in between the skin and the scalp. So there wasn't bruising on Kaylee's rear shoulder, but that's okay because it still holds true to what I said yesterday, because there is bruising on her back, big bruising, and actual abrasions. The outer table of the skull shows a superficial curvilinear 3/4 inch incise defect. So an incise defect, whatever that means. But again, this is going to be just a J-shaped cut. It's a little bit curvilinear with 1/16 inch abrasions consistent with a partially serrated K-bar. On the left temporoparietal scalp is approximately 2.5 by 3/8 inch linear incise wound. So right here. Now the reason it's in purple is because this is the telltale sign. This is actually going to be more than likely a post-mortem wound. I've gone back through all the victims. The only ones that'll have post-mortem wounds are Maddie, and 2 of the wounds on Ethan's leg are post-mortem, but Kaylee actually has a few. So this happened after Kaylee was likely no longer alive. As you can see, the minimally hemorrhagic wound track, when it says minimally hemorrhagic, it means it really didn't bleed, which means her heart wasn't pumping blood when this wound was made. So there's several wounds on Kaylee that I believe lead us to the conclusion of they were really doing some staging with Kaylee. On the left superior parietal scalp is approximately 1/2 inch by 1/16 inch linear incise wound. So another I've got it looking too big here, but another cut on top of the head, 1/4 inch deep, just a shallow cut. On the left superior occipital scalp, the occipital is this back. This is the back of the head. This is this part of the back of the head right here. 3/4 inch by 1/32 of an inch. It's a linear incise wound. It's got ecchymosis, which is bruising. So it's a cut on the back of her head, 1/4 inch deep. Now, on the medial left forehead is a 1 1/4 by 3/8 inch curved linear incise wound. A regular tan abrasion is present at the margins of the wound. The medial wound edge shows dark brown discoloration. So the medial means the inside. Dark brown discoloration means the blood actually dripped down and began scabbing right here is all that means. Focal, subscapular, and subgaleal hemorrhage surrounds this wound, meaning this was a forceful wound, and it resulted in posteriorly displaced segment of bone. So the dark brown edge corresponding with the subscapular and subgaleal hemorrhage indicates a very forceful cut right here, and it was 1 inch deep. All right, now this one is 2 wounds. Within the left eyebrow is a wound complex consisting of 2 perpendicularly intersecting incise wounds, each measuring 9/16 by up to 3/8 of an inch. 2 parallel linear 1/4 inch tan abrasions extend superiorly from the superior edge of this wound. So a 1/4 inch tan abrasion, that would be consistent really with a serrate as well, but this is another minimally hemorrhagic wound track. So these are likely more post-mortem wounds, and you can see they're incise wound. Doesn't say they're superficial, so they're actually just little cuts above her eye. And I don't know if they cross like a T or if it's at the end like a T, but these are likely post-mortem. This happened after the fact. Now on this one, this is a curved linear wound in the central forehead, 2 inches long by 1/4 inch wide. Discontinuous dark red marginal abrasion is present. So again, indicating serrate, 1/2 inch deep. On the right medial forehead is a 1 1/4 inch wound complex consisting of 2 intersecting incise wounds, and with a 1/16 to 1/8 inch dark red marginal abrasion, again indicating a serrate. Wound tracks from front to back and downward approximately 1/4 of an inch. So it's 2 cuts on her forehead like this. Now this one on the right forehead, partially following the contour of the right eyebrow. So right here, this is a 3 1/4 inch by up to a 1/2 inch curved linear incise wound with scalloped edges and undermining. Again, scalloped edges is how the pathologist clearly states this is a serrated edged knife. So this wound, no doubt, was cut with a serrated edge knife. Whenever they say scalloped edges, it's all over. The wound track is front to back downward, a 1/2 inch deep. Now, at the right temple is a 3/4 inch by 3/16 inch linear stab wound, oriented from 12 to 6. The 12 o'clock end is squared, the 6 o'clock end is sharp. The wound track travels right to left and downward, and its depth is approximately 1 inch. This is only 1 inch. This cannot be the K-bar. It just can't. And it says it has a linear abraded tail, extends from the 6 o'clock end. It is hemorrhagic. It happened during the attack, but this one cannot be from a K-bar because it's 1 inch deep, and it's got a 12 o'clock squared end and a 6 o'clock sharp end. So with the 12 o'clock squared end on a 1 inch deep stab, the K-bar, the clip point of the K-bar goes to 2 inches. So it goes all the way to right here. So a 1 inch deep wound with a K-bar would have showed 2 sharp ends. They know this didn't get caused by a K-bar knife. If they actually studied it and looked at it, they would know that. So that's definitive proof that one didn't come from a K-bar. Now at the tip of the nose, there's a 5/16 by 132 inch superficial linear incised wound, heading from front to back to a depth of only 1/16 of an inch. So it's like just a little cut right on the end of her nose. On the upper right lip is a 1 by 1/16 inch linear incised wound right here. And let's see, the wound travels from right to left and slightly downwards. You see, I barely have it pointing downward to a depth of only 1/8 of an inch. So it's 1 inch long, 1/8 of an inch, just a little cut. Now this one is super suspicious, and this to me is some type of staging. There's no other way around it because it's very unnecessary. This is on her left cheek, and it's a cluster of 5 stab wounds ranging from a 1/4 inch to 1 inch in length, 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 in width, oriented in various directions. Now I just have it going in different directions like it's a star, but I don't know which direction they're all going in. At least 3 of the wounds show 1 squared end and 1 sharp end, and they're only 2 inches deep. So these are not caused by the K-bar. This is caused by something else. And it just kind of tells you about everything. It's 2 inches deep. I mean, these are stab wounds. So this is a purposeful stab wound. It certainly looks like, some type of, it's either some type of message or some type of staging. The lower labial mucosa shows multiple parallel, intersecting, superficial, and deep incised wounds. Now, this is actually going to be stab wounds they're calling them stab wounds of the teeth area because it goes through and it, you can see the right lateral incisor, central incisor, left incisor are sharply divided. So that means a stab to the teeth when they're sharply divided. Additionally, the lateral incisor, left mandible, and central incisor are sharply divided. So that's from a stab. The tongue shows numerous sharp force defects extending 3/4 inches into the muscle. So definitely stabs right here. Tooth fragments and clotted blood are admixed within the oral cavity. A wire appearing to be part of a fixed retainer has been displaced and is resting on the tongue. So she had basically like a bridge at some point or some kind of fixed retainer, one that she didn't pull out at night. So it was dislodged when they stabbed her teeth. So that one's pretty terrible. There's that. Now, she has the double cut on her neck, just like Maddie, and they're curved linear with somewhat irregular edges. So we know it was from a knife with serrades. What I'm getting is when it says somewhat irregular edges, these are probably more like fine striations, like the kitchen knife, each measuring approximately 4 inches in length up to 1 inch in width. Dark brown abrasions, yellow tan abrasions. It's hemorrhagic, so this happened as she's being attacked. This isn't post-mortem, and it went to a depth of 1 inch. Now, here's what I find interesting. This wasn't post-mortem. I can pretty much guarantee you that Maddie was attacked first. Maddie is unalived at this point. So after they do this, they then go over to Maddie. And they do the same thing to Maddie. This is another reason I think this is some serious staging going on here, because Maddie's are minimally hemorrhagic wound tracks. Hers were post-mortem. And it was the same exact thing as was done to Kaylee. But again, this is post-mortem. I believe once they put Kaylee back in the bed, they started doing things to try to make this thing look a little bit more organic with Kaylee back in the bed for whatever reason. They may just have been that smart at trying to throw off investigators. And I say that because the next wounds on Kaylee are these two long. They're 5.5 up to 1.25 inches. Where they see the first one, two parallel curvilinear incise wound. One is 3 3/4 up to an inch. And that's the top one. The bottom one is 5.5 inches up to 1.25 inches. So these are two long cuts, 2 inches deep right here to go along with these two up here. But these, moderate associated soft tissue hemorrhage, these are likely done post-mortem as well. So I guess Olivia was right about the post-mortem wounds, but it wasn't just on Kaylee. It was on Kaylee and Maddie, and there was a couple on Ethan as well. But these seem purposeful. I think they're just trying to throw off investigators at staging. These are 2 inches deep. Now, this one right here was a fatal wound on Kaylee. It was on the anterior left chest above the left breast, and it's a stab wound. It's 1.25 inches wide, but we can't determine the depth, so I can't tell you what kind of knife, but it was 10 o'clock in is squared, 4 o'clock in is sharp. So 10 to 4, square, sharp, and 1.25 inches wide. I mean, that's wider than the K-bar. So no way to really determine what knife was used on that one. But the fact that the intercostal artery and vein are incised, there's abundant associated soft tissue hemorrhage. So this was a fatal wound, but it wouldn't have been fatal immediately. So these two on the anterior left chest, superior aspect of the left breast, are two 1.25 by 3/16 inch stab wounds, 3 inches deep. The 4 o'clock end and the 3 o'clock ends are squared. The 10 and the 9 ends are sharp. At 3 inches, even the K-bar flattens out on that side. So there's no way to know what type of knife this was. Even though it's a little bit wider than the K-bar blade, it's pretty consistent at 3 inches. But these are non-fatal wounds. This just cut the subcutaneous tissue, breast tissue, and musculature of the left chest. So these were not fatal. Now this one was fatal. And this one on the anterior left chest, medial aspect of the left breast, is an approximately 1.25 by 3/8 inch linear stab wound oriented from 9 to 3. So 9 to 3. The 9 o'clock end is sharp, 3 o'clock end is squared. And this is intercostal artery and vein are incised, so this would have been a fatal wound. One thing I'm pretty certain of is this type of knife that I believe was used on Maddie at 5 inches is significantly wider than 1.25 inches. So I think it eliminates this. This one is more consistent with the serrated edge K-bar. Now this one is a 7-inch wound, and it's 1.25 inch by 1.5 inch. It's at 11 o'clock, 5 o'clock. It's actually 3 different stabs, 9 to 11 on the interior chest. And that's why we're going to see, the ends are rounded. 3 stabs, probably some twisting. And 7 inches deep. These are definitely fatal. Right lung is hit, the liver is hit, and 400 milliliters of blood is gathered in the cavity right there. But this one at 7 inches, only 1.25 inches wide, is consistent with the K-bar, I believe, hemorrhagic wound tracks. And it talks about involving the third intercostal space, fourth rib, and fourth intercostal. This is how they know that like the right lung, right diaphragmatic leaflet, and the liver. But this is how they know it was 3 stab wounds, because of the defects on the ribs. Hey, now this cut on Kaylee's arm right here, lateral left upper arm, it's 3 inches wide, 5/16 inch. Again, minimally hemorrhagic wound tract. This is an unnecessary cut right here. Just trying to add cuts for some reason. I think it's staging. The posterior left upper arm, 1/2 inch by 1/8 inch linear stab wound, oriented from 8 to 2. The 8 end is squared, the 2 end is sharp. Wound tract travels 3/4 of an inch. All right, so it's a 1/2 inch wide at 3/4 of an inch deep, but it can't be the K-bar, because the clip point on the K-bar at 3/4 inch would be sharp on both sides, not 8 and 2 squared. This one would be more consistent with the knife that was mainly injuring Maddie. So we definitely have 2 knives on Kaylee here. At least one knife on Maddie that's not consistent with the K-bar, but when you add them both together, we've got consistency across the board. On the left elbow is a 7/16 by 1/8 inch linear incise wound with irregular edges. It's just a little cut on the left elbow. Irregular edges, serrades typically. Then we get into the trauma that I've already kind of gone over, but the blunt force, the fact that the lips show petechial hemorrhage, and that's typically from either smothering, neck or chest compressions. And unlike the eyes, where it's just usually from cutting the air off, so you could account a lung injury for that, but I don't think you can in this one. Now I believe I've already gone through all this in the last video. That's not all. When we think about the marks on her face, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, I'll do that in another video, but she's going to have pattern marks here across her left cheek and her nose, with abrasions that are not uniform. And she's going to have 2 big black eyes, what they call raccoon eyes. But punctate abrasions that they discuss here, what likely caused those are dragging the body across rough surface, such as carpet, wooden floor, concrete, or gravel. So it appears she was probably struck by something on this side, and most of these wounds come from being dragged across the floor, probably back up those steps. Then on the other side, there's a big triangular shaped abrasion, meaning her skin has been rubbed off, probably from being dragged across the floor, along with bruises and more odd abrasions. It's quite clear to me that she was struck and she's been dragged, and I think you'll agree at the end of this real quick. This is another big contusion, a purple bruise. They can't say that it's because they slammed her up against the sheetrock, because there isn't even, any marks of impact. This is just strictly likely hair hitting the wall. There's no, I've put my own head through sheetrock walls before, and it doesn't cause, brain bleeds, but there is nothing. You can see the impact with Xana in the room. It's got an impact mark. These are likely just the hairs flinging with blood on them. So, oh, by the way, and she has some pretty severe brain issues from the blunt force. Okay, this is a compilation of all the wounds on Kaylee's face. And one thing it notes is she had what's called the raccoon eyes. Both of her eyes were totally black. She had the abrasions with the non-typical, I forgot what they called them. Punctate. Where's it at? Punctate. Delicate superior set of. Okay, here we go. Punctate red abrasions, dragging the body across a rough surface. So punctate, that means that they're not in any type of, form. They're just random. So we've got a strange mark on the nose, an abrasion with punctate abrasions around it. Another mark on the cheek here that's curved linear, a round bruise on the cheek, more abrasions with smaller abrasions, a square abrasion. This is a big square abrasion on the cheek, meaning abrasion is the skin has been rubbed off because it rubbed on something. These are two parallel bruises. This is a big square bruise going from the corner of her mouth to the ear. In the middle of it is not bruised, so it's squared around with a non-bruised space in the middle with an abrasion underneath it. So I really believe that this is possibly Kaylee being falling on that staircase. I mean, I think maybe as she's running down the stairs away from the perp, she may have fell and hit that staircase. I certainly believe she was drugged back up that staircase and caused a lot of this. But there's something else, because when she did that did not stop her. This is what I was going to show you. Yesterday I was talking about the bruise in the subscapular, but this is subscalpular, so that bruise is not there. But these abrasions and everything else on the back of the head still holds true. Everything we talked about. Now, this is also the wall where Kaylee was found, and this is never tested for DNA, but it's likely her blood, but there's no impact areas on this wall anywhere, so it can't account for the bruising on the back of her head or the marks on her back. We've already discussed that. And on her back, this is what we haven't discussed right here, I think. The midline upper back, there's a 1/2 inch by 1/8 inch curved linear superficial abrasion with surrounding purple contusion. So there's a cut right here in the middle of her back, and it's all bruised around it. That's what the purple contusion is. So clear indication that she was hit in the back at some point. And then on her left hand, on her dorsal left hand, she has 3 abrasions at the base of the index finger, vertically oriented, and a 3/4 inch linear abrasion underlying a blue contusion. So right here on her finger, at the base of the index finger, there's a vertically oriented. So there's a vertically oriented abrasion. So the skin is scraped off, and underneath that is a blue contusion. Then, proximal to the 5th finger, a 1/4 inch diameter, roughly circular abrasion right here on her knuckle. And then there is a 3/4 inch linear abrasion in between the two right here. And then she had something on her pinky knuckle here that looked like a de-roofed blister. Like this appears to me like Kaylee took a swing, got a lick in on somebody. That's exactly what it looks like, because with bruising on the knuckles here and abrasions, and if she had a pimple on her finger, it busted. I think she got her left hand and she clocked them. I think she got a good lick in on them. She sure did. But that was it, because she doesn't have any defensive wounds anywhere else. When she got that lick in, it was over. So one of the things I wanted to point out, with 10 defensive wounds on Maddie's left arm, no defensive wounds anywhere else, I also want to point out Q13.1, that they were so interested in the DNA under her fingernail. Of course, that was on her left-hand fingernail. She's fighting off the attacker. There's no way Kaylee can get wounded on her back. There's nothing around her here to cause the other wounds. And when you look at this, and I think this tells the story, here's the bed. This is the head of the bed. This is where Maddie was, and look at all the blood here from Maddie. This is all Maddie's blood here. When I look at the blood on the wall behind the bed, I believe all of this came from Maddie. And the reason I say that is when I pull it up, because this is BG and 44 right here, and this is obviously from Maddie's side of the bed. But when I look at the blood spatter on BG, nothing comes from the right. Some of it comes from straight up, but almost everything the tails point to coming from Maddie's side of the bed. When I look at 44, they're either coming from straight up or from Maddie's side of the bed. There's only a couple I could even try to force coming from a different direction. So when you get to the side of the bed that Kaylee was on, look, you see the minimal amount of blood where Kaylee was. And although you've got spatter going across here, this just doesn't look organic to me because there's no impact marks. This is what I believe is more staging, because you can see there's nothing. There's no headboard. There's nothing that would cause any abrasions to Kaylee's back or the back of her head, and she absolutely had them. So what caused them if she was laying in this bed? Nothing. This is the final breakdown of Kaylee. This is all of her injuries. And when you look at her injuries, I think it tells a story. So on the face, we've got all of these different bruises. There's some pattern bruises, a lot of things that are just not in a pattern. And with the punctate abrasions, I mean, I think it's clear that she was likely either hit in the face, knocked down, fell and hit her head on the stairs, and then was drugged back up the stairs, partially at least, on her face. I don't know of anything else that would account for that. On her head, you can see on the top of her head, there are 3 cuts on the very top. One of them was post-mortem for some reason. Was that post-mortem cut because they wanted to try to get more blood in her hair so they could get it on the wall? I don't know. But I do know that on the back of her head, there was a cut and 2 abrasions and bruising, significant bruising right here. On her back, there's a red abrasion with significant bruising here. And then on the left temple, there was a shallow stab wound here that doesn't seem to have any relevance to the entire situation, and it's on the wrong side of her head if she's being attacked from the right. And then on her scalp, we've got some cuts up here. These curvilinear cuts are kind of strange. I don't know if those are just cuts for whatever reason, or if maybe this was something that happened in the fall that cut these curvilinear cuts. But there's a couple of slashes up here. This could have been during a fight. There's a cut to her lip right here. There's a abrasion on the end of her nose. There's this conjunction of wounds here that make no sense whatsoever. There's post-mortem cuts here above her eye. If she fell and she knocked her teeth pretty hard during the fall that caused this, it would be reason for them to stab this area to try to make it look like it was part of the attack and cover up. These are the 3 fatal wounds here, here, and here. There's a couple of shallow stab wounds that happened here. These are post-mortem. These are unnecessary. This is a post-mortem cut here. Just looks like they're trying to add wounds. Here's a stab to the deltoid. There is no defensive wounds anywhere on her hands except for her fist, which you can see down here. Here's the fist area. And other than that, you've just got this little cut on the back of her elbow. So, but you do have a big bruise here, a contusion, it said, with a curvilinear red abrasion in the middle of the back that just does not make any sense. I think you would agree. But after going through and analyzing every single one of these wounds, I can tell you that the wounds on Kaylee are consistent with 2 different knives used and blunt force, possibly from falling on the stairs and then subsequently being dragged on the stairs. The wounds to the back of the head and her back and the lack of objects near the bed to account for this indicate she was attacked outside of the bed. And considering some of the wounds appear to be post-mortem and other wounds seem unnecessary, staging is likely to throw off the investigation, and it worked, in my humble opinion. And the knives used that are consistent with the wounds on Kaylee are that same knife that I believe was used on Maddie and a K-bar with serrated edges.